my whole philosophy was like, you can be good at several things, but it's hard to be great at several things.
Hi there, or should I say dry there? I will promptly see myself out. Welcome back to the Wild Business Growth Podcast. This is your place to hear from a new entrepreneur or innovator every single Wednesday morning who's turning wild ideas into wild growth. I'm your host, Max Branstetter, founder and podcast producer at MaxPodcasting, and you can email me at max@maxpodcasting.com to save time with your high-quality podcast. This is episode 1738. If you ignore the 7 and also ignore my singing voice. And today's guest is Alli Webb. Alli is the co-founder of Drybar. And in addition to that, she is a New York Times bestselling author, has graced the cover of Inc. magazine, has been a guest shark on Shark Tank, has been named a top fascinating woman by Marie Claire, a 40 under 40 by Fortune magazine, and one of the 100 most creative people by Fast Company. In this interview, we talked about how she built Drybar from initially a mobile business to a location in California and now over 150 locations around the United States, and also talked about creative lessons from that and her other businesses, including Squeeze and Becket and Quill. And of course, French fries and creativity, which I think could be a whole separate podcast. Let's get trapped in Alli's web. Enjoy the show. Alrighty, we are here with Alli Webb. You know her from Drybar and also being probably the coolest person on earth ever. I'm gonna add that to your Wikipedia page right after this. But
Thanks, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, always happy to contribute. But this is really cool. Just blown away by your story, your brand. I think your brands have helped out so many people. Before we kind of get into some things you've learned from the business world, I want to start off with a quick story. My girlfriend, Dana, her first Instagram photo that featured me, this was back in 2019. So, big deal whenever a couple's first pictured together. She was rocking her Drybar blowout. So it has a lot of sentimental value, but obviously, she loved it so much and look gorgeous always to feature it in that picture. And I think Drybar and what you've created will always hold a special place in our hearts. So that's really what this interview is about. So we can wrap up any minute now if you want.
Well, that's really sweet to hear. And I think that's what's been probably the best part about this brand is how it's impacted people. I don't think I realized like we would impact so many women the way we have. And, I just liked my hair, being blown out personally, and I'm a longtime stylist and my hair is really like crazy and frizzy. But what was a surprise to me and all of us really was that like, we were really impacting women's lives, and women were telling us they don't go to like, a board meeting without a blowout, or an important event, or a date, or before they're giving birth, or in sadder times, like a funeral. Like there's just things that like, women, Drybar has become such a like part of the fabric of their lives. And just like your example, it's like, not only do women physically, look really great on the outside, but that translates into feeling really good on the inside and giving them this confidence and this like pep in their step. And, once we realized that, we knew we were onto something that, we always say we kind of inadvertently stumbled onto this opportunity because we did not realize how big it was.
People somewhat care about it and somewhat care about their hair. Can you tell me about the first blowout that you ever did or gave? I don't know the terminology, but the first blowout that you did.
I grew up in South Florida and it was so humid all the time that I was like, I did not like my big frizzy hair and I always wanted it straight and I couldn't really figure out how to do it. And I remember like working at a hair salon when I was like 16 or something. And then, the stylist there would occasionally blow out my hair and it was free because it was like a perk of the job. And I really studied what they were doing because I was so fascinated by it. And I tried and I couldn't figure it out. Obviously, it would take me years to do that. So yeah, and then I guess like the first time I ever did a blowout was like when I went to beauty school and started to learn there. But I also, while I was in beauty school, I was working for the owner of a hair salon in Boca. You kind of start practicing on your friends. And in beauty school, you're practicing on, like in my experience anyways, because I was in South Florida, I was like, the little old ladies would come in, for $1 blowout, and I would do that. And I learned a lot from doing their hair, because they didn't have a lot of hair, but they wanted a lot of volume. And so that was a really good education. So yeah, I don't remember no one's ever asked me that, but I don't remember the very first blowout, because it's just like, it goes back really far.
Tell me about the second blowout. No, I'm just kidding. No, that actually speaks volumes, pun intended, because if you can properly handle hair with that Florida humidity, then I think you can handle it in any sort of circumstance ever. So I think it's instrumental that you kind of were able to do that at an early age in such a crazy environment. I mean, I'm sweating just thinking about that.
Yeah, I mean, it is like an art, and I think that was the thing that was interesting about starting Drybar. Like, one of the big questions I had early on was like, are there going to be enough stylists out there that like this very niche part of the business, which was just blow drying hair? Because even in beauty school, like, you're taught like how to cut and color and perms and all the things. Frankly, blowouts is like an underserved area in beauty schools, which we've kind of helped to change. But I was really curious and frankly worried about finding enough just doing blowouts, and like I did, and luckily there were. So although I feel like pre-pandemic we had about 4,000 stylists, probably had upwards of 10,000, over the last 11 years who've come and gone. And I feel like we've really trained an industry, because like I mentioned, beauty schools don't really set up stylists for success in that way. We were really having to teach a lot of stylists how to execute a really great blowout.
Sometimes you have to create something, and then there's the whole education piece as far as getting that out there. Let's get to Drybar, which my buddy Spencer literally just moved into his new apartment in New York, like on top of a Drybar. And I used to live in that area, literally would walk by it all the time. That's an example of it, but I think you're in hundreds of locations now. Obviously, the brand speaks for itself. When was the moment that you knew that you would actually start a business in the first place?
My parents were entrepreneurs, so I always had that, like, entrepreneurial spirit. And it wasn't like scary for me to think about starting my own business. And I didn't have that, like, I just didn't have that fear. I'd been a long time stylist. I'd worked for other people for most of my career. And then I, got married and moved to LA and became a stay-at-home mom, and was home with my boys for like almost 5 years when I got the itch to do something for myself, which is what led me to start my mobile blow dry business, because I thought I could, kind of do it on my own time frame and my own schedule. And so, I started that business as a way to like get out of the house, do something for myself, earn a little extra cash. I was only charging $40, which was like, 220s seemed pretty simple to me. And during that time, that I realized like there was a pretty big hole in the marketplace, and there, for something like Drybar, that just didn't exist, and that's when I started thinking like, why isn't there a place? And, and I figured out very quickly that it was like stylists, really wanted that time to do cuts and color where they were making more money. And it did seem like a daunting task to, open a business where you just did blowouts all day long. And I think, I imagine like people just didn't think that was like, because of like, a lot of like criticism I heard early on was like, there's just like not enough people out there who want that. And I was like, well, I think there are, and if the price is right, and we made this an affordable luxury. And that was really a huge piece of the DNA of this brand, was like allowing women of all, different backgrounds and, economic status to be able to do this, whether it's once a week or once a month or just for a special occasion. You're not spending what you would normally spend in a traditional salon. And so it was like kind of it all really worked together. And I felt like at least one location would work, and that was really all we were planning on in those early days.
And here we are today. There's 2 locations total. No, just see, I can't resist with the dad jokes. I will turn those off. What allowed you to stay firm to your beliefs that I really believe that there's a market for this, and this is going to resonate with people, when you were coming across naysayers?
Well, I felt so strongly in my gut and from my own experience, and I think that running the mobile business and getting so busy, I mean, part of also why I started Drybar as and straight at home, my mobile business was like a springboard to that, was because I got so busy, and I got too busy that I was really saying no more than I was saying yes, and so I think that gave me a lot of confidence to know that, like, at least in this small pocket of LA, I'm getting so busy that I'm gonna either have to like bring on other people to help me, like, meet all the demand, or like I could actually open a brick and mortar instead of me going to them, they come to me. And that was really why I felt like, again, on a very small scale, there was no big business plan of like, hey, we're going to open 150 locations and create this massive product line. Like none of that was, nobody was thinking that. I was just hoping to have my one little shop and pick up my kids from school. But I think I really got the confidence from like knowing, I knew tons of girls, that loved the idea of getting a blowout. And there's just, as like you've experienced with your girlfriend, there's nothing like somebody else doing your hair. It just looks better for the most part for most women. And it ultimately makes you feel better. And I knew that like instinctually, as like a client, as a stylist, like I really felt like, at least then on a very small scale, I had no idea how big this could get, that this would work, amongst like my little core group of my little core client group. And, obviously, like I said, we really underestimated the demand that was there, which was massive.
Totally. And I, feel the same thing when I'm getting my buzz cuts. Well, not quite the same thing, but when somebody's doing your hair, there is something magical about it. I know it has so much more meaning, even more than it has at surface level.
Yeah.
You mentioned kind of how you weren't thinking of scaling this thing, going bonkers with it from the get-go. What changed?
Well, the response, I didn't, like I said, I didn't realize, how much we were going to impact these women. And it was so busy, so fast. And when I started to notice this, like, women coming in very serious, like it was so palpable, like transformation that was happening. And I think that's when I knew, like, holy shit, we're onto something. It's like, it's like being able to capture confidence for a pretty inexpensive price, and it's like, I'm like, women are going to do this all day long. It's like, and then that's kind of the feedback I was getting, it's like women were like, we're going to use Drybar at every turn because they wanted that like boost of confidence. Not to mention, like you said, it feels good. It's relaxing. Like I think we did a pretty good job of setting up a space that, felt really comfortable, and it's like a bar setting and you're watching a chick flick and you can use your phone or be on your laptop and like, get a bunch of work done while somebody like makes your hair look amazing. It's a pretty great overall experience on a lot of different levels. And I think that's when we knew like this was like a really, really big opportunity.
It's exciting to hear about just how you can feel the energy just when you talk about it. Those first moments of it being busy and when you start to have to say no, which is, I think, a really good problem to have as an entrepreneur.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing.
When you think about how you and team have scaled this thing from one location to the next and now all across the country and beyond, what's a key decision you made in terms of scaling that has been instrumental in making this thing a success?
A lot of things, I mean, I really have to give a lot of credit to my brother, Michael, who's my business partner. I was so head down and in the trenches and in the shops. We realized we needed to raise money, and we realized we needed to, if we were going to organically grow this thing, because we weren't able to like make it work completely out of my wheelhouse and not something that I was very well versed in. But my brother, knew kind of more how to do that, or how to find the people who knew how to do that. And, he also like realized like we're going to need to hire people who actually know how to grow and scale a business. And he had a lot of friends in business. And so he was like, talking to all of his, a lot of his friends, and this, getting a lot of great advice. And, that advice, proved to be really helpful for us. And, he had the foresight to say, listen, we got to hire people who know more than we do, which is a lot about how to grow and scale business. We had the idea and the vision and entrepreneurial and customer service and aesthetic background, but, managing what was becoming hundreds of people and how to like do that and do it well was like really foreign to us. And we knew we had this massive opportunity that we didn't want to frankly fuck up, that it's like, okay, let's get people in here who are smarter than us and know the things that we don't know. And there's a lot of things that we don't know that we don't know that we don't know. once we started to bring in other people, we really, that was it when the business was really able to flourish and grow even more.
When I studied abroad, I love studying abroad in London, but actually the worst part of it was having to do like a 30 plus page research paper on a business. That business turned out to be Dishoom, really, really cool Indian restaurant. Shout out previous guest. Shout out, that's a fucking tongue twister. shout out previous guest, Sarah Stark. Reason I bring this up is I was challenged with the question, how do you keep the vibe and brand of a restaurant and the touch and feel of a restaurant intact while you expand from one location to, 5 to 10 locations?
Yeah.
You've tackled that challenge on an even much greater scale than that. Once it gets to like 50, 100, 150 locations, how do you ensure that you're still delivering that same fantastic customer experience?
Well, I mean, it's the single hardest part of the whole thing, and as we've grown and scaled, I mean, that's obviously what's like most near and dear to my heart, which is like, creating that, that environment and that experience that you're, no matter what dry bar you're sitting in one part of the country, it's always really great. And, I mean, that's like, we've put a lot of like robust training into place, and we have, stylists that are trainers, and we have lots of different, checks and balances, and, lots of different procedures and things that happen before stylists go on the floor. But, it's not perfect over the years, like, it kind of has ebbed and flowed, and sometimes we were doing it better than others. And, it's been a major learning experience, and it's obviously not just the stylist, it's like the customer service and how our bartenders are treating people. So it's like a constant, never ending project and thing that we have to always stay on to make sure. And as you would imagine, the big compliment I can get from, a client is that like, oh, I was in everywhere I go, it's great, and that's like the best compliment I could hear, because it's really hard, and it's like a lot of oversight. It's a lot of systems. It's a lot of like staying on top of people. And, like I said, I think sometimes we've done it better than others, and it's the people, it's making sure that you have the right people in place. And sometimes we have, and sometimes we haven't.
It's such a wonderful challenge, and you have just done it swimmingly. I mean, Drybar is something that is such a beast of a creation and keeps growing and growing. And somewhere along the way, you really got the entrepreneurial bug, because as if Drybar wasn't enough, you helped launch Squeeze as well as Becket and Quill. There's these other kind of specialty businesses that are in really, really cool spaces. Where the hell did this come from?
Because my parents were entrepreneurs and I grew up, it was like kind of embedded in me when I was a kid. I wasn't paying attention to that necessarily, but me and my brother like worked at my parents' store as kids. We used to like ticket clothes and like sweep the floor and like, do the cash register. And we were just there all the time as my parents' business. And we really saw how my parents ran a business and how they bent over backwards for customers, which I think largely informed, our like obsession with customer service. Watching, my parents were so brilliant at it. I have, entrepreneurial blood, no doubt about it, and I think I've always, even though it took me, I was 35 when we started Drybar, and that was obviously such a great experience. And, and I remember like feeling like for a lot of my life, like I wanted to work for myself. I had so many ideas of other businesses I wanted to start, when I was like in my early 20s, I had a dog walking business, which is like funny. And then 20s, before I went to beauty school, Michael and I worked for Nicole Miller, who was a big, fashion designer back in the day. And we were working for her in New York, but then we moved back to South Florida and opened up a couple of boutiques. So, I've always like had my hand in some sort of entrepreneurial world. Building Drybar and growing Drybar over the last 11 years, like I learned so much, for someone who didn't go to college and doesn't have a business degree or much of a pedigree in that sense. I really got such an education in growing and scaling a business that it's given me a lot of confidence to start other businesses, to invest in other businesses. And, Squeeze was like really more of my brother's like brainchild, because as a bald guy, he wasn't able to really experience Drybar. And he also, he felt really frustrated, similar to Drybar, of like, there was like two bad choices out there, for massages, like high-end spas or like, discount chains that are just not great, which is the same scenario for Drybar. And So that was a really fun business to start, and it's app based. So you book, you tip, you pay all in the app. It's very, very customizable. And that's kind of the differentiator. And you when you're done with your massage, you just walk out the door. You don't have to deal with, paying and all of that. So what I learned from Drybar has given me the confidence and the know-how and, to be able to go out and do that. And, Becket and Quill, which is direct to consumer business, jewelry business, is very, very, very different than anything I've done. Where I think my sweet spot is definitely customer experience, customer service, in the brick and mortar kind of setting, which Becket and Quill is not. Although I think there is still a big element of that world in this direct to consumer market. But it's a lot of learning for me right now. I'm really having to figure out how to get people to our website and how to build this business. It's all new levers that I'm having to pull. But I really enjoy it, and I think because I'm such an entrepreneur at heart, it's and a hustler, I'm figuring it out, and I'm, using all the connections I have and trying to figure out how to do this and ask as many people as I can. And, so it's kind of in me. And I think that is pretty much true probably of all entrepreneurs. It's if you have that bug to be your own boss, start your own thing, it's pretty hard to let it go.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite things to see with entrepreneurs. I think it's inspiring enough when you have one business that you spend years and every second of every day building. And then when you start to see new businesses come out of that same entrepreneur, and you can just kind of feel the energy there and feel that, what, this is kind of scratching a niche in a slightly different space. This is something, oh, I see. There's lessons that translate here, but holy cow, this is a totally new business model. Maybe this is something that there's a lot of learning involved. So cool that you're doing that. So cool that you're doing that is also something that somebody might say to you if you are rocking a podcast for your business or your brand. But if you've been doing it for a little bit, you know that, holy shit, this takes a lot of time to podcast. Email me at max@maxpodcasting.com. I will take lots of those hours off your plate. I'm talking about the 3 Ps of podcasting: planning, production, and promotion. Yes, editing is a big piece of that. Let me know. You can email me at max@maxpodcasting.com. Now, back to Alli tackling her next business, the business of wild shout-out variety. That switch the gears, shall we? So let's switch gears a little bit. Let's get to a fan favorite segment called the Wild Business Shout-Out of the Week. The Wild Business Shout-Out of the Week! Wild Business Shout-Out of the Week. This is where we talk about a brand, creative marketing campaign, something really, really cool that caught our attention. There's something with Olive and June that you think is really, really cool. You mind sharing a little bit about that?
Olive and June it started as a nail salon. One of my best friends, Sarah Gibson Tuttle, is the founder of that. And she, had a career and a life in finance in New York before it, and fell in love with Drybar. And that's kind of how we met and became friends. And she wanted to open kind of the Drybar of nails because she also felt like there was a pretty big hole in the market for a higher end and a higher field nail salon. And she opened that a couple of years ago. Gosh, I think she's been in business maybe 7 or 8 years. I could be wrong. And, and she did it, beautifully. But, when the pandemic hit, like so many businesses, she had to pivot, and she had already started making some products, but then, really expanded that. And now is, really more focused on developing, nail polishes and lots of, manicure sets and pedicure sets, which is, the timing was really brilliant because, we weren't able to go get manicures and pedicures as women like we had, historically done before. So, she's just done such a great job of penetrating an already billion-dollar industry with truly the best nail polishes out there that last forever, never chip. And it's for real. I mean, if you look at her Instagram, all her posts are people posting their nails that have been, I'm sure as a guy, this is a little bit out of your sphere of knowledge.
Hey,
but
I'm chomping at the bit here.
But if you ever look at their Instagram, it's all posts of women who have had the same nail polish on for 7 or 8 days, which is unheard of. She's really captured this very, very special market in the nail world that is, pretty hard to do, similar to creating a new industry in the hair world with Drybar. She's largely done that with nails. She's launched in Target and just kind of has a cult following now. And it's been fun to watch her progress. And I'm an investor in the business, and she's one of my best friends. So it's just really fun to watch that business continue to grow and thrive and I have so much respect for her and her, ability to continue to make it work and be so successful.
That's amazing. And how does it make you feel when you see businesses like that took kind of a similar model as Drybar?
It's awesome. And, we hear that a lot from people, that like, that they want to be like the lash bar, like the dry bar of lashes or the dry bar of makeup and that kind of thing. And
The Drybar of podcasting.
yeah, it's so funny, how, what we did with Drybar, which was all just very intuitive to me, it's like I grew up in hair salons, like going to hair salons with like my mom, because my mom was like the quintessential every Saturday, went to the hair salon and got in one space, got a manicure and a pedicure, and she got her hair done, and she would sometimes get a massage, and like she would spend hours there, and that was like her thing. And I did that with her a lot. But what I didn't, with the hairstylists, a lot of times hairstylists do cut and color, but then there's, as I got more and more into the industry, learned like there's colorists and then there's cutters, and I found that the ones I gravitated towards that I thought were the best were ones who really just focused on one area, whether they were doing cuts or color. And I've always gone to separate, a colorist or a cutter, almost never the same person. And I think that was part of what, informed me like to want to do Drybar as like a single service business, because I wanted us to do one thing and be the best at it. And and I felt like I didn't, even though I cut hair for years, I didn't want to do haircuts. I liked doing blowouts. And so I wanted to keep it very simple and streamlined to that, which was what a lot of businesses are now modeling, is like, let's do one thing and do it really well. Because, my whole philosophy was like, you can be good at several things, but it's hard to be great at several things. And not, it's like, you think in so many scenarios, like, basketball players or, athletes that are like great at, basketball, or I just watched the Tiger Woods documentary. So. Fascinating. But like, they're really good at that. There's been, I know that there's been athletes that have tried to do other sports that haven't been as good at it. It's because they're really good at one thing, and it's like, there's a tons of scenarios that you can point to with that, where that was kind of my philosophy of like, I really know this and I really understand blowouts. It's been a passion of mine since I was a kid, and this is what I'm going to focus on. And I know I can be good at. Try to convolute the brand and bring in a lot of other things, it's just not going to be as good. And I knew that. And so in my gut that I wouldn't waver from that. And I think that, we've modeled that. And I think a lot of other places have, followed suit with that are just doing lashes or just doing brows or just doing makeup, and who knows, I'm sure it'll go full circle again, like everything does. But that was really this area that we captured that nobody was doing.
Drybar of podcasting. We're going to do it. You heard it here first. Let's wrap up with some rapid fire Q&A. You ready for it?
Yes.
All right, let's get wild. This is a question submitted by Dana's co-teacher and friend, Kristen. So shout out Kristen O'Brien. She asks, what is your favorite hair tool and hair product?
Oh gosh. I would say that my favorite is our 3-day bender, the Drybar curling iron. It has like a rotating barrel. It's just my favorite tool. I like a lot of them, but that's the one I use like whenever I curl my hair. So I love that. And I'd say like one of my favorite Drybar products is our Mai Tai, like our sea salt spritzer. It's like a beachy spray, but it's super light and it like gives your hair like a really amazing texture. I also probably daily use our detox dry shampoo. We have this new scent called vanilla bourbon that I'm obsessed with. I know that's 3, but those are my top.
No,
3.
keep going. No, we're just going to start a list here. But you mentioned sea salt spritzer. I'm a sucker for superb alliteration, so that, hits it on the head there. What is your favorite creative hobby?
Does like shopping count?
Sure. Yeah. Creative shopping. We'll roll with it.
I get really excited about clothes and putting things together, and I love shopping. Like I find it very relaxing, and I don't know, it might more be considered my drug of choice, but
hey, there's far worse drugs out there, so we'll give it to you. You and Adrian have an awesome podcast, Raising the Bar, where you talk to so many amazing entrepreneurs and just people doing really cool things. What is a guest or an episode that just made your jaw drop because you had such a good time?
Gosh, we've had so many of them, but what springs to mind first is we interviewed the guy who started the kombucha company, GT Dave's, and GT Dave. He's his story is really phenomenal of how he started this business. And what was funny about that episode is that, it was obviously in pandemic, and Adrian's like probably like 20 minutes into our interview with him. And Adrian realized he hadn't hit record. So we didn't
Oh,
record the
no.
interview. So we were like, God. So we had to tell him, and he had just gotten to this like very vulnerable part of his story. And Adrian's like, speaking of vulnerability, we didn't record this. So we rescheduled it. And then we came back and we did it again. And, I don't know if it was because we had some time with him already or what, but he went in and told us like, this, his story, which, would take me too long to explain it, but it was like, it's a pretty like epic story of like his life and growing up in LA as like a gay kid, and his brother died really young, and just all these things that informed who he became. And a lot of adversity and a lot of trouble, a lot of pain. His mom was really sick. It's like the origin of how this company got started is pretty phenomenal. And I mean, we were like, as you said, your jaw dropping was like exactly how we were. We were just so blown away by this guy and how what a deep story we were getting into. That one. And also, the founder of, or the CEO of Feeding America, Claire, I think it's Fontenot, she's Bottenot. It's a hard name to pronounce, but her story, I mean, we were like literally crying on the podcast. Her story is really phenomenal too. And how she also overcame a lot of adversity. Her mom adopted tons of like homeless kids, and just has such a profound story of like not wasting food, and how she built her life. And it's a really beautiful episode too.
Those are amazing. And you mentioned the horror stories of not recording. I know, like I've checked like 15 times throughout this that we've been recording, but I needed to check again when you said that, just because you can never be.
I know, it's like shit. Yeah.
Yeah. What is a quirk you have? Maybe someone, family, friends calls you out for. It's a little quirky about your personality, but it's who you are.
Probably like my kids like call me out on like when I'm on Instagram, like I'm making a story on Instagram, they always make fun of me. They're like, you don't really talk like that in real life. And I'm like, what are you? Yes, I do. So I would say they think like, my like persona changes, and I really try not to do that. But I don't know if it's just like in a, quote unquote on stage, and I change a little, but I would say that's like a quirk of my personality.
Yeah, it's a natural thing. It's really funny that your kids have picked up on it. They obviously see more of you with your quote unquote on stage and off stage versus anyone else. So I think they're the experts. And then very, very important question. What is your favorite type of fry? Like French fries, sweet potato fries, waffle fries, whatever.
I would say like one of my favorite fries. I mean, it's probably a toss up between McDonald's fries, which I like grew up on, and Jack in the Box curly fries that have like that seasoning on them. I love a good seasoned fry. Yeah. I mean, French fries are like my ride or dies. I love them so much.
your ride or die fries. Well, awesome. Yeah. Alli, thank you so much. This has been amazing. Really, really appreciate your tips, your lessons, your stories, your preferred French fry seasoning. Where's the best place for people to connect with you and any of your businesses that you want to shout out?
I would say my Instagram is the best like hub for all the things that I have going on from all my other businesses and podcasts. It's just Alli Webb, ALLIWEBB.
Perfect. BB. And last thing, final thought, stage is yours. It could be a quote. It could be a line. It could be your reaction to a Jack in the Box. I'm just going to keep ride or dies with the fries, but send us off here. Final thoughts.
I don't know. I guess to get a little more poetic of like, I've just recently read it a few different times in different places of like, to be gentle with each other. You kind of never know what somebody else is battling.
I'll tell you this much. I am not battling against Alli's advice and entrepreneurship tips because she is just unbelievable. Alli, thank you so much for sharing your stories, your tips, insights, advice, laughs. We could keep going. And thank you, Wild listeners, for tuning in to another episode. If you want to hear more wild stories like this one, make sure to follow the Wild Business Growth Podcast on your favorite podcast app and tell a friend about the podcast. You can also find us on Good Pods and check out the podcast I'm listening to at the moment. And for any help with podcast production, you can learn more at MaxPodcasting.com. Until next time, let your business run wild.
Bring on the bongos!